John's 4th grade, I guess. And that was my dad's mother and father. So it'd be my great-grandfather, yeah, and grandmother. And that's Mom and Dad's wedding picture in 1926. My mother's picture over here.
You mean Cletus and Revy in 1926?
No, that's Mom and Dad, my mom and dad.
They got married in 1926? The same
I was
as...
born in 1930.
And your parents got married in 1926?
And what?
Did your parents get married in 1926? That's what Peggy said yesterday.
I believe so.
That's when that tradition of having the Garrett Thanksgiving started. Was 1926, the year that your parents married.
Yeah.
And your parents married the same year. Okay. I never knew that.
It was
Big year.
sort of funny. My mom and dad were, Dad and her husband ran a rooming house and a restaurant in Vincennes. And but my dad and her husband fought all the time. I mean, fought. And I was looking at a newspaper article, and it showed up in the Wisconsin newspaper and in the archives. And they had a piece in there about John Barney and John Bellessa having a very successful business in Vincennes, Indiana. But both of them were in trouble with the law because they found the moonshine still in the basement. So they were making moonshine and selling it. But anyway, they got in a fight. My brother was telling me about this the other day, and he saw them fighting. My dad was fighting, and his dad was fighting, and his dad had an ice pick and was stabbing my dad, and he was getting him pretty good. He ended up in the hospital, and so Mom threw Dad an ice pick and said, "Let's make it even." And then she stood back and watched them fight. The cops come, both of them jabbed each other all over the place, and Dad ended up in the hospital. And I don't know about her, but anyway, they sort of split up just pretty well. Well, my mother ended up divorcing twice. She divorced her husband twice, and because she thought Dad would marry her the first time, and Dad took off. He didn't want to get. He was 32 years old before he got married, and so Dad called her from. He was working in the mines down Southern Illinois, and so he called her and said, "If you'll come down here, I'll marry you." But she was still married to John Barney at that time because she had 3 kids and had to have some help raising them and stuff. So she remarried him. Well, her husband was an alcoholic, and my brother was telling me the other day, and he beat on him constantly to the kids. He was mean to the kids, and Mom was separated from him most of the time. Well, Mom said okay, so they went. She went down to Benton. She was in Vincennes, and she went down to Benton, Illinois. And back then, if you wanted a divorce, all you had to do was just go to the courthouse and give them a reason, and they sign you off on that divorce. So she divorced him. Divorced him on the top floor, come down and married Dad down below. And somebody said, "Etta, why in the world did you marry him so fast for us?" She said, "That son of a bitch wasn't going to get away from me again."
Dad, pull your chair just enough that Gary can get the picture of the telephone up there.
Yeah.
And so they got married in 1926, and I was born in 1930, and Dale was born in 1936. But it was, then they moved.
Did you get it?
Mm-hmm. They had, it was a turmoil period of time in the 20s. I mean, there was very little law, there was gangsters, there was everything down in Southern Illinois. And I never could quite figure out why they moved to Mount Carmel. Dad bought a farm. It had been repossessed by the Federal Land Bank in St. Louis, and he bought that farm, 40 acres, and house, barn, garage, everything for $1,600. And we moved up here, and he started working in the mines up here, but I never could quite figure it out. But I think what's happening, I really believe that her husband, John Barney, he was working down in Southern Illinois with my dad. And when my mother had a big scar right here, and she would never tell me what it was. But the boys knew about it, and my sis, and they said that she was sitting where they lived and where I was born. She was sitting in the living room, and somebody shot through the window trying to hit my dad, and it hit her. The bullet hit her, and they were just sure it was John Barney. And I got a feeling that it was just getting a little rough to stay down there, so Dad moved clear up here. I guess their dad was pretty mean. He was from Hungary. He was Hungarian. Came over about the same time in the whole country.
Don, I've forgotten the picture there, right in the corner, right there.
Right there?
Yes. I forgot what
Well,
occasion that was.
That's called the Haven. That's out on the eastern shore of Virginia.
That's what?
The Haven, that was called in the eastern shore of Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
My great-great-grandfather on my mother's side and her grandmother were, they lived there. He bought that in 1796 and sold it in 1806, and he died, and then she ended up coming. They brought her to Indiana to try to lose her, to keep her out of an inheritance, and left her over here and went back. The guy went back and told him she was dead. So, but that's the home they lived in, and Teresa was there. She got pictures of the inside. It was up for sale. She got all the pictures from the inside. It's really interesting to look at those pictures. And she went to the courthouse and found the papers where Grandpa had sold the property, when he bought it and when he sold it. Mm. And so that's a picture. It's in the history books. I've got a history book in there, and there's a picture of it in there too. It's a pretty home. I've seen it. It's right on the highway up there. Beautiful home. It's been at. Look how big it is. It goes clear way back up in there. Mm-hmm. There's been different sections. I forget how many bathrooms she said that had in it. Bedrooms, fireplaces. Pretty old. I don't know when it was built. He bought it in 1796. So.
Yeah, it's pretty old.
A lot of history.
A lot of history.
You get digging back, you'd be surprised at the things that you find that you never knew that nobody ever told us.
Yeah. That story of Grandma and Grandpa and John Barney and all that somebody could turn that into a book and a movie.
Oh yeah. There was a lot of sis told me a lot of stuff. And when I was out there with Clarence, he started talking about that, and he talked for about an hour. This was things out of his childhood, you know.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. He remembered people and dates, and that's amazing. Now, he can't remember what happened yesterday, but he sure could tell a story about that. Yeah. And I'd heard the same stories from my sister and my other brother too. But I had a grandfather that got killed in the War of 1812 in Canada when they were fighting up there. And we went up there and found the battlefield and a lot of the stuff, but could never find his grave. But we talked to a historian up there in one of the places, and he said that after the battle there was several hundred English and Americans that got killed in that battle, and when they gathered up the bodies, they just put them in a big pile and burned them, and they were just put away that way. That was interesting, but there was no record of where they were buried or anything like that. We had the court records where his daughter had filed for a claim because her dad got killed, and it was in the court, and it had all that information in it. It's quite interesting. Sitting over at the barber shop the other day, I don't think I told you this, but the guy was getting his hair cut. We struck up a conversation, and we was talking about things that happened back, and he knew a lot about the Battle of Tippecanoe and all those. Named some of the leaders, the people who were in command, and my grandfather was in the militia, so they called him to active duty, and he fought in the Battle of Tippecanoe, which that's up about the middle part of the state, you know.
Yeah.
And we continued talking, and I said my mother was a Ferguson, and he says Spurgeon Ferguson's, and that's Spurgeon, Indiana, and that's where my her grandpa formed the first school up there, and he was a school teacher, and then they had that family had 6 boys and a girl, and 5 of the 6 boys were in the Civil War, and my great grandfather was one of them. He was a doctor, and so we talked a little bit, and he says, "Did you ever hear of anybody called Samuel Denton Julian Jr.?" And I said, "Yeah, that was my second great grandfather." He said, "Mine too." And his name was Julian, and he lives in Oakland City.
Cool.
And but he started doing genealogy, and he has over 80,000 names.
Oh wow.
But they're not all our family. Oh, there's
Don't scoot back.
that new phone's ringing. What's my phone? That's my phone.